Chapter 26:12. After saying that, the woman turned around and walked away. Jane Fankel and Ariel hurried to catch up with the woman. They dared not ask any more questions. In short, everything that had happened just now, even the woman before them, had shown signs of abnormality. She ran a few kilometers away from the manor. Only then did the woman stop. Jane Fankel was so tired that she could not even stand up straight. She dared not stop during the whole process. Ariel was still full of energy. At the same time, he kept his guard up against the mysterious woman. They did not meet any obstacles along the way. It made him suspect the woman's identity even more. "Is this enough?" Jane Fankel asked worriedly. "No." The woman turned around and looked at Jane Fankel. Suddenly, Jane Fankel saw the woman's pupils. She was so scared that she took a few steps back and fell on her butt. Ariel's scalp went numb. He saw it too. He saw that the woman's pupils were the same as old Max's, inhuman pupils. Ariel pulled out his knife and pointed it at the mysterious woman. "Are you one of them?" The mysterious woman curled her lips. "One of them? Aren't you two the same?" "Us. We have nothing to do with those things." Even Jane Fankel could not convince herself of this. After all, two of her closest relatives had turned into those things. She was not sure whether she would turn into those things or not. Before this, she had no idea about it at all. "Maybe she is, but I am not. I have nothing to do with her or her family." Ariel hated Jane Fankel very much. Even if he knew Jane Fankel might be a victim, still, he could not help but hate Jane Fankel. You received the dragon blood baptism, and are still unscathed. You are telling me you are not a dragon descendant? What dragon blood baptism? What dragon descendant? I don't understand what you are talking about. If a normal person comes in contact with dragon blood, it will be like taking a bath in acid. If a drop of dragon blood is eaten by mistake, it will be like taking the deadliest poison. But you have not shown any abnormalities until now. It means that not only do you have dragon blood, but you have also awakened it. What are you talking about? I don't even know what you are talking about. Don't be in a hurry to deny it. Do you have greater endurance and stamina than ordinary people? I'm a mercenary. I've received the most professional training, so it's not strange that my endurance and stamina are better than ordinary people. When Iyer said that, he actually felt a little guilty, because he knew his own situation. His endurance, stamina, and even his body were more like Data. Not only were they slightly stronger than ordinary people, but they were much, much stronger. However, Iyer had always kept this secret in his heart, and never revealed it to anyone. Some people's dragon bloodline awakening will have a very strong reaction, and the stronger the reaction, the purer the dragon bloodline is. Some dragon descendants' awakening is recessive, and the symptoms are not strong. Your physique is only slightly stronger than ordinary people, so you should belong to the recessive awakening of dragon descendants. Are you trying to tell me that I'm actually related to her? There are far more dragon descendants in this world than you can imagine. But that doesn't mean you are related, the mysterious woman said calmly. I want to know what happened here. What happened to my father and my big brother? Jane Fankel looked at the mysterious woman anxiously. It's complicated, and it's not something you can get involved in, so it's better if you don't know too much. But now that we are involved, do you think we can get out of this? Iyer said calmly. He didn't dare to completely agree with the mysterious woman, but he felt that her words had some credibility. Do you remember that there was a third man other than you two, old Max and Caesar? He's like us. He's like us, but he's also different from us. What do you mean? He's a real dragon, the shadow dragon, Haber Timur Haber, and he's the cause of all this. The mysterious woman looked at Jane Fankel and smiled. And he's your grandfather's grandfather. How is that possible? He looks old enough to be my son. That's the truth. How do you know? The mysterious woman laughed. According to seniority, I should be your grandmother. You? Is it strange? Dragons have long lives. Although their descendants can't live for thousands of years like the dragons, they still live longer than ordinary people. I'm 99 years old now. That's impossible. You look. Jane Fankel had wanted to say, you look like my daughter. However, she swallowed the words. Jane Fankel was still suspicious. She even suspected that this was some kind of parody show. The mysterious woman saw that Jane Fankel was still suspicious of her. So she continued, "Actually, I'm your grandfather's sister, so it's fine if you call me Grandma. Of course, I'd prefer you to call me by my name, Varian Max. I'm not interested in your relationship. I just want to know what the fuck is going on," Ayer said impatiently. "I don't know what's going on either. My teammates and I are only responsible for hunting him down, Haber Timur Haber." "Hunting him down? Didn't you say he's your grandfather? So what? Since you're hunting him down, where are your teammates?" "They're where they should be. When are you going to act?" "That's a real dragon. You can think of it as the scariest creature in the world. Do you think you can kill him as you please? What else? Are you going to get a nuclear weapon and blow him up?" "If you can, I don't mind," Varianki said. "If you can, do you think I need you?" Ayer said mockingly. For a moment, the three of them fell silent. Varianki sat down and rested. At the same time, she took out a few compressed biscuits and gave them to Ayer and Jane Fankel. Ayer, who had just finished a biscuit, suddenly stood up. "No, I can't stay here. It's too dangerous." Varianki glanced at Ayer. "You think you can leave? What do you mean? Is there something waiting for us outside? Not on the outskirts but around us." Chapter 26:13. "Do you know why we're here?" Varian asked Marx in return. "God knows," Ayer said unhappily. "It's because of this oak tree." Valerie patted the thick trunk and said, "Her grandfather and I planted this tree together. We were only 8 years old back then." "I'm not interested in your old stories." Ayer was getting more and more annoyed. "Of course. Our father told us that the oak tree was a sacred tree where the gods lived. It could resist the power of the devil. For a long time, I didn't understand what it meant. Until the day I awakened my dragon bloodline and came into contact with a world that didn't belong to ordinary people. It was also that day that I saw the devil from hell." Varian was still talking to herself. Ayer and Jane Fankel could tell who Varian was referring to when she mentioned the devil. "After that, I left the family and joined an organization, the Dragon Slayers." Valerie took a deep breath and continued, "In the past few decades, I've been hunting dragons all over the world. I've earned a title Dragon Slayer." Varian Marx rolled up the sleeve of her arm. There was a dragon tattoo on it. "My life's wish is to baptize my body with the blood of Haber Timur Haber." Valerie suddenly revealed a terrifying and ferocious expression. She patted the trunk of the oak tree heavily. The thick trunk shook slightly, and the mist shrouding the area dissipated a lot. Varian was slightly dazed. She changed her mind and stroked the tree trunk lightly. To her, this tree carried too many memories. Under the protection of the oak tree, the devil's power can't reach it. Outside the range of the branches and leaves are the mist and the strange dragons. This is the power of the demonic dragon, Haber Timur Haber. When will the mist dissipate? Dissipate? As long as he doesn't retract his domain, it will never dissipate. Won't he get tired? Maybe, but it's like keeping your eyes open. Whenever you feel tired, you might close your eyes and rest for a while. Besides, Haber Timur Haber's endurance is much stronger than yours. In other words, we will be trapped here forever. My companions are deploying, and they have already informed their helpers. Someone will be willing to help you. Haber Timur Haber has a lot of enemies. It can even be said that he has enemies all over the world. Not long ago, he did a few big things and killed a lot of people. However, he also fought with us. Many of our people died, and he was injured. I think he might have come here to hide, but he neglected me. As one of his pursuers, I know him better than anyone else. Can the helper you found really defeat him? As long as there are enough people, there's hope, Varian said calmly. In fact, even she wasn't confident. After all, she had fought with Haber Timur Haber many times. He knew how cunning Haber Timur Haber was. No one was confident that they could defeat Haber Timur Haber. No one could guarantee that they would be able to kill him. However, this was an opportunity. After all, there weren't many chances for Haber Timur Haber to be injured. Being injured meant that he would be easier to deal with. Varian Marx was happy to choose this moment to deal with Haber Timur Haber. He did not hope to kill Haber Timur Haber. As long as she could injure him more severely, she would have achieved her goal. How long are we going to be trapped here? I still have an important contract to sign. The first thing you should think about now is not the contract, but how to stay alive. Varian glanced at Jane Fankel. In 3 days at most, this place will become a battlefield. Once the battle starts, you too might die here. What should we do? Can't you protect us? Protect you? Don't joke around. Our opponent is a demonic dragon. And it's the most cunning demonic dragon in history, Haber Timur Haber. No one will have the time to protect 2 ants at that time. You have no other choice but to protect yourselves. How do we protect ourselves? You must at least learn how to control and use the power contained in your blood. Although it won't give you sudden power, it will at least increase your magic resistance and immobility resistance. But what should we do? Jane Fankel's first reaction was to refuse. However, the next moment, she understood that this woman who called herself her grandmother would not be merciful to her just because of their blood relationship. Trust me, you won't want to fall into Haber Timur Haber's hands. Varian sneered at Jane Fankel. Why do you think he's hiding here? Why? For your blood, of course, Varian said. To him, you're the closest people to him. Your bloodlines are naturally compatible, so he needs your blood to recover from his injuries. Wait, who are you? My father and brother, they are also, of course, they think they are favored by their ancestors. In fact, they are just fattened pigs that could be slaughtered by Haber Timur Haber at any time. Jane Fankel felt a little dizzy when she heard Varian's words. Is there no way to save them? Haha. They willingly accepted Haber Timur Haber's power, so they can't escape. Based on the current situation, we don't have the power to fight Haber Timur Haber. If the 2 of them are still alive before our reinforcements arrive, they might have a chance to survive. However, if Haber Timur Haber feels that his condition isn't good enough to fight against our reinforcements, he will definitely kill the 2 of them in order to quickly recover from his injuries. Varian Max looked at Jane Fankel. Jane Fankel was eager to give it a try. Don't even think about saving them. No matter how much you say, they won't believe you. They might even expose their whereabouts. You are a merchant, so you should know that it's not worth it. Chapter 26:14. Right now, Chen Zhao was inside the river diagram. Chen Zhao soaked in the divine power potion. Although he couldn't control every cell at will, he was still able to do it. But Chen Zhao could still clearly feel the activity or weakness of every cell. However, the divine power elixir did not work on the cellular level. Chen Zhao's body had evolved many times with the golden key. It could be said to have reached an unbelievably perfect state. Of course, it didn't mean that Chen Zhao's body had evolved to the extreme. It was just that it had reached the limit of what Chen Zhao could bear with his current level. However, as the divine power potion seeped in, Chen Zhao's cells were giving off pleasant feedback. The divine power potion was very complicated, so complicated that Chen Zhao couldn't understand it. This was the domain of alchemists. The first thing Chen Zhao felt was the effect of the potion. Chen Zhao was most familiar with this feeling. After all, the first potion Chen Zhao came into contact with was the strength potion. It was something to lay a foundation for Chen Zhao. It could be said that all of Chen Zhao's power gains in the past were built on the premise of the strength potion. But now he realized that something in his body had been triggered. Chen Zhao couldn't completely understand what it was either. That was because it was a feeling that was more detailed than that of cells. Right now, Chen Zhao was like a towering skyscraper. This gave Chen Zhao the feeling that someone was tearing down the foundation of a skyscraper and building and strengthening it at the same time. Yes, this was the feeling. There was pain, but there was also comfort. Therefore, it was difficult to tell whether it was pain or comfort, or both. The reconstruction process was not fast. Chen Zhao soaked in the divine power potion for 7 days and 7 nights. Chen Zhao realized that his body seemed to have changed. It wasn't a complete transformation. It was more like he was wearing a new set of clothes. From the inside to the outside, his senses had changed. Even his spirit, energy and spirit had changed. Chen Zhao tested the sensations in his body. Under extreme conditions, the increase in strength was not much. However, it was still an obvious improvement. Chen Zhao returned to soak in the divine power potion. Chen Zhao had a new feeling. Something that had been hidden in his body for a long time, exploded like a barrel of gunpowder that had been ignited. Agent X. Chen Zhao had once broken into a certain lab. Then, he unscrupulously poured Agent X into his mouth. Chen Zhao didn't feel much at the time. Even Chen Zhao had almost forgotten about it. That was because Agent X did not bring about too many changes to him. Moreover, Chen Zhao had cultivated many times and increased his realm. They also did not discover the existence of Drug X. He had always thought that it was because he couldn't absorb Agent X. Therefore, Chen Zhao had already metabolized Agent X. But at this moment, Chen Zhao realized something. It's not gone, it's always been there. However, it had turned into molecules and kept flowing in his body. But the divine power potion activated it. Not only had the X drug been activated, but the divine power drug had also made up for its deficiencies. This chemical process makes it even more perfect. It made Chen Zhao's foundation even more perfect. Chen Zhao's body was baptized by Agent X again and again. The extreme chemical reaction between science and magic was happening in his body. Biological functions and thinking were actually chemical reactions. The chemical reaction of amino acids, sugar, and dopamine caused the cerebral cortex to produce a phenomenon of microcurrent discharge. The so-called emotions were actually the electrical discharge of the brain. Chen Zhao realized that his brain had become very active. That was a sign that spiritual energy was spreading outward. Chen Zhao's spiritual energy was actually not very strong. What was strong was Chen Zhao's soul. After all, it was because of the soul key. Chen Zhao had devoured many soul fragments. These fragments fed back to his soul, making it tough and indestructible. But Chen Zhao's spiritual energy was weak. After all, Chen Zhao walked the path of strengthening. He had almost never actively cultivated his spiritual energy. He had always been strengthening passively. When his soul became stronger, his spiritual energy would naturally become stronger. But now, Chen Zhao realized that his spiritual energy was growing exponentially. Agent X didn't just seem to be acting on his body. It was also happening in his brain. However, Chen Zhao's control over his spiritual energy was extremely weak. Chen Zhao's spiritual energy was like a mist. It floated out and became thinner and thinner, until he could not feel anything at all. Chen Zhao could not condense his spiritual energy together, like those spiritual magic masters, and form telekinesis. Chen Zhao could only use it for the most basic function, perception. But when his spiritual energy spread out, it was still within Chen Zhao's domain. Within Chen Zhao's 1,500-meter domain, his spiritual energy dissipated before it could spread out. On the other hand, the things that spiritual power could perceive were clearer and more comprehensive than the things that one's domain could perceive. The two overlapped in terms of perception. This also caused Chen Zhao's spiritual energy growth to be of little value. The spiritual energy's function overlapped with the domain, but it could not reach the domain's range, clarity, and sensitivity. So spiritual energy was almost useless to Chen Zhao. Of course, to say that it was completely useless was not entirely true. If someone tried to use soul attack on Chen Zhao, they would first have to destroy the spiritual energy that Chen Zhao spread out. The same kind of attack would be weakened before it could even touch Chen Zhao. When Chen Zhao had fought Yedu Rainster last time, he had suffered from a soul attack. That thing was really hard to bear. But there weren't many enemies who could use soul attacks. There were even fewer soul attacks that could threaten him. Of course, Chen Zhao did not mind having more. It was never bad to have more skills. Chen Zhao cared more about the growth of his body and strength. Chen Zhao could not be sure how strong he was now. However, Chen Zhao still had a simple test. That was to release a neutron star with all his strength. He wanted to see how powerful the neutron star was. With the improvement of his basic body, and the activation of Agent X, Chen Zhao's body improved in all aspects. Chen Zhao could not use accurate numbers for comparison. However, the power of the neutron star he released could flatten a 100-meter hill. This destructive power was quite impressive. Moreover, the 100-meter range was almost an absolute destructive range. Even Chen Zhao could be heavily injured in this range. Compared to before, the absolute destructive power of a 50-meter range was 2 times greater. The destructive radius was 2 times greater. Compared to a flat surface, it was 4 times greater. Moreover, the destructive power within the radius was 5 times greater. Chapter 26:15. During the third soak, Chen Zhao felt that he had a deeper understanding of his divinized giant form. All the inadequacies in the past were suddenly filled and perfected. The divinized giant form was more advanced than the basic foundation stones and the activation of the X drug. However, the improvement wasn't as great as the two, because an increase in the foundation meant an increase in the base. The improvement of the divinized giant form was obvious, but not as great as expected. What really improved was Chen Zhao's control over his power. Then Chen Zhao soaked in the divine power potion again. However, he felt that the potion's effects had clearly weakened. Chen Zhao thought to himself, this thing is indeed good. I'll get Fate Nitak to make more next time. Of course, the other materials were easy to take care of. It was just the 100 bloodlines of the King of Power's subordinates. Chen Zhao had to collect them for a year. After all, Chen Zhao couldn't wander around hell every day. He also couldn't meet the subordinates of the King of Power every day. After the fourth soak, Chen Zhao had completely absorbed the potion's effects. The originally colorful liquid had now turned into a pure transparent color. Chen Zhao could feel that the divine power potion was still effective on him. It was just that the amount wasn't enough. Chen Zhao started cultivating in the small world again. Currently, in its complete state, Chen Zhao could create 100,000 high-density white dwarfs, weighing tens of thousands of tons at the same time. In terms of pure destructive power, Chen Zhao's full-powered attack could destroy an entire city instantly. Through the physical movement of the 100,000 black balls, he could easily destroy most enemies. However, Chen Zhao felt that this wasn't the limit of the small world. The growth of the small world hadn't reached its limit either. In Chen Zhao's previous trip to hell, the small world had absorbed large amounts of power from the demon lords. However, the absorption method was very crude. The amount of power he could use was very little. There was even more power stored in the small world. Chen Zhao needed to refine this power and make it his true power. As he continued to refine it, the power of the demon lords made the heavenly patterns in the small world flourish. Suddenly, Chen Zhao realized that there was a green fruit in the small world. He didn't know when it had formed. The green fruit was very abrupt and solid. A solid object had actually appeared in his small world. The fruit was very bright and green, as tender as a crisp apple. Chen Zhao tilted his head and looked at the green fruit. With a thought, the fruit fell from the heavenly pattern. Chen Zhao waved his hand, and the fruit landed in his hand. There was nothing special about it. Chen Zhao wasn't afraid of the poison. He took a bite. In an instant, an extremely rich life force spread in his mouth along with the juicy flesh of the fruit. Ah, Chen Zhao moaned in pleasure. None of the ingredients in the world could compare to this fruit. It was a completely unfamiliar texture, but it was more delicious than any other ingredient. In fact, the taste was not something that ordinary people could eat. This was because ordinary people simply could not withstand such a strong life force. As the saying goes, it's too weak to be nourished. Chen Zhao ate the fruit in a few bites and felt his vitality increase again. Apart from increasing his vitality, the fruit did not seem to have other effects. However, if he diluted the life force in the flesh of the fruit, he didn't know if it could be given to his family. Chen Zhao continued cultivating in the small world. At the same time, he took out a few frozen demon lord corpses. Beelzebub Zophi had helped him seal it to stop the power from flowing out of the demon lord's corpses. While absorbing the power from the corpses, Chen Zhao realized that a second green fruit had formed in the small world. Chen Zhao thought for a moment and put the fruit away. He continued to focus on refining the demon lord's power. Using their power as nutrients, he continuously nourished the small world. Chen Zhao could already feel that the power of the small world had surpassed his own. Just then, Chen Zhao realized that the small world was feeding back to him. The two couldn't be improved separately, because Chen Zhao himself was the one maintaining the small world. First, the control of the small world had increased from 100,000 white dwarfs to 500,000. It was 5 times more than before. At the same time, Chen Zhao could condense 10 compact neutron stars through the small world without using his body. Each one weighed 100 million tons. The speed of condensation also increased greatly. The process that would have taken more than 10 minutes could be completed in a few minutes now. The 10 compact neutron stars circled around him. Chen Zhao could control their speed at will. This meant that most attacks would not be able to get close to him. Chen Zhao cultivated in the river map for almost half a year. However, only a few hours had passed outside. Every time he came out of the river map, he would feel like he was back in the world. Just then, Chen Zhao realized that there were a few missed calls from Zhang Ting in China. "Hey Zhang Ting, what's up?" "Boss, we finished the education system you asked us to write last time. We also invited a few university professors and experts to discuss it. I'll send the document to you now." "Sure, send it over." "Oh, the company's on holiday, right?" "Everyone's on holiday. Only a few people are doing year-end summaries. They'll be released in a day or two." A proper company wouldn't let the boss go on holiday just because he wanted to. Everyone would just drop their work and go home to enjoy themselves. A normal holiday would require a few people to do the final summary. At the same time, they would also notify their partner companies about the progress. "Sure, check your account. I'll transfer some money to you. Go to the bank and exchange it. Then, send a big red packet to those who delayed their holidays." "Boss, you're not feeding your employees, you're feeding your enemies. You're giving them such high benefits now. If you can't give them such great benefits in the future, they'll only be disloyal. I'll only be richer in the future," Chen Zhao said unconcerned. Sigh. Zhang Ting had a headache now. She even hated Chen Zhao a little. It was impossible for him to resign, not in this lifetime. She really couldn't find a boss more generous and easy to serve than Chen Zhao. This was much more comfortable than when she was her own boss. "Oh boss, do you know the joke of a 40-meter knife? I'm overseas, but it doesn't mean I don't know the jokes online. Say, if X can create a 40-meter knife, what's the effect?" Chapter 26:16. When the density of matter reaches or approaches that of a neutron star, the form of matter is meaningless, Chen Zhao said. There's no fundamental difference between a ball and a knife. At the same weight, a ball the size of a ping-pong ball is more lethal than a 40-meter knife. Boss, I'm talking in camera language, not real physics. The effect of a 40-meter knife is much better than a ping-pong ball. No, the setting of X needs to be considered from the perspective of physics. Fine. Zhang Ting didn't understand why Chen Zhao had to focus on physics. To her, the characteristic of X itself wasn't scientific. But Chen Zhao had to make an unscientific character conform to the characteristics of physics. Wasn't that putting the cart before the horse? But he was the boss. Also, book a suite in a Magic City hotel on the 15th day of the year. It'll be the venue for our company's gathering. I'll pay for it. Zhang Ting wasn't surprised by Chen Zhao's request at all. Chen Zhao had always been so generous. If he didn't make this request, Zhang Ting would find it strange. Also book 2 plane tickets or train tickets to Dragon Tiger Mountain in Jiangxi. Boss, you're going to burn incense. No, I'm old friends with the Celestial Master sect leader. We're having a gathering. Fine. That's all you rich people want now. Zhang Ting clearly misunderstood Chen Zhao. After hanging up the phone, Zhang Ting told the good news that the boss was going to give them a bonus. Seeing that it was still early, Chen Zhao flew into the sky again. Chen Zhao was curious. What was his limit? In hell, he'd flown 300,000 meters in the sky. But that was in hell. Hell was countless times bigger than the human world. The thickness of the atmosphere was also much thicker. Gravity could no longer restrict Chen Zhao. Now Chen Zhao could resist the strong radiation of the universe. He could even absorb it and turn it into his own magic. This was no longer a limiting factor for Chen Zhao. What restricted him was the thinness of the air. Even Chen Zhao needed to breathe now. Of course, it wasn't difficult for Chen Zhao to temporarily change to internal breathing. Even ordinary people might be able to do it. For example, some people could dive for 20 to 30 minutes without any equipment. This was a typical internal breathing technique. Chen Zhao could absorb the oxygen in the water. But in the absolute vacuum of the universe, he couldn't do it. Chen Zhao could already fly up to 80,000 meters in the air. Generally, the altitude of a commercial plane was only 8 to 12,000 meters. 20,000 meters above them would be the ozone layer. Chen Zhao's current limit was the middle layer. Above them was the dissipation layer, where there was almost no air. Even Chen Zhao's small world couldn't gather enough air. The air density here was a billionth of that at sea level. In other words, 100 billion cubic meters of air here was equivalent to 1 cubic meter of air at sea level. Here, Chen Zhao couldn't use neutron star, white dwarf and other skills. This was because Chen Zhao's neutron stars and white dwarfs were mainly made by condensing air. However, Chen Zhao could not even absorb air here, let alone create high-density neutron stars and white dwarfs. But in this environment that was close to a vacuum, there was no air resistance. Chen Zhao's speed also increased greatly. This was the harshest environment on Earth. Even the two poles were far from this place. Every time he reached an extreme environment and stayed there for a long time, Chen Zhao's body would adapt. His body's functions would start to coordinate, allowing him to adapt to the environment. Chen Zhao doubted if he could really adapt to a vacuum environment one day. Of course, it could also be an evolution of his body's functions. It could also be that his cultivation had reached the point where he could fly. Chen Zhao looked like he could fly now, but he was still far from reaching the legendary 9 heavens, plucking the moon, and the 9 hells. Most of Chen Zhao's powers were unnatural, but many of them were related to science. Chen Zhao moved. In a few seconds he returned to Mirror Lake. He followed the tunnel at the bottom of Mirror Lake and entered thousands of meters underground. After a few months, a large number of underground creatures had appeared here again. Last time, Chen Zhao had already killed a batch. Moreover, the flesh of these creatures was all used as ingredients for Marina's restaurant. The growth rate of these underground creatures was very fast, and some of them were large enough to threaten the safety of humans. Most of them should have gathered here from the tunnel that extended in all directions. The reason was that there was water here, so the creatures would gather here. If there was water, there would be food. Even humans had this instinct, let alone animals. The creatures that gathered here from other places were clearly different from the aquatic creatures here. The creatures from other places were clearly much larger. On the other hand, the aquatic creatures here were obviously much smaller. Back then, Chen Zhao had killed many of the creatures in this lake, but he'd still left some small ones. But in a few months, they'd grown considerably. Chen Zhao had considered using this place as a breeding farm. So this time he was especially merciful. Even if some creatures attacked him first, he would choose to dodge most of the time, instead of killing them with a slap. After all, every single creature here was extremely valuable as a source of food. Of course, Chen Zhao wouldn't use their meat as ingredients for his restaurant without trying them first. Chen Zhao had tried every creature here first. He had also tested them to ensure that their meat was safe. Chen Zhao made some records, such as the forms and habits of every creature here. Not every creature here was aggressive. Some of them ate the minerals that had softened in the lake water. These creatures were Chen Zhao's favorite because they weren't aggressive and had a simple source of food. Chen Zhao wondered if he should open up a larger space underground for a breeding farm. After circling around, he brought a few creatures back to the surface. However, most of them died as soon as they returned. Only a mollusk that looked like a snail was still alive. Chapter 26:17. Chen Zhao looked at the mollusks that he'd named stone snails. They were omnivores. Chen Zhao had observed them before. An adult stone snail could weigh up to 700 kilograms, but half of its weight was in its stone shell. The stone shell of a stone snail was very hard. Apart from its own shell, it would also use mud and sharp rocks to stick on its shell. As long as other predators attacked it, it would immediately retreat into its shell. Its main food was water plants and some minerals. Chen Zhao really liked stone snail meat. Marina's restaurant sales were also very good. A plate of 150 grams of stone snail meat cost $150 at Marina's restaurant. At least 200 servings of stone snail meat were sold every day. After deducting the costs, Chen Zhao's profit from the stone snail meat alone reached $25,000 a day. Therefore, if it was just Marina restaurant alone, the supply of stone snails would exceed the demand. Marina's restaurant would at most use 30 kilograms a day, It wasn't even 1/10 of an adult stone snail. Moreover, stone snails weren't cheap. Chen Zhao was thinking about raising stone snails on a large scale. At least, that was if he could raise them. Stone snails could adapt to the environment on the ground. Now it depended on its growth cycle and food intake. In the morning, after Fei Lai went to work, Chen Zhao called Isaac. Isaac, come to my house. You don't know? Okay, I'll give you the address. A while later, Isaac arrived at Chen Zhao's house. Like most people, he was shocked when he saw Chen Zhao's Mirror Lake Manor. Even Isaac was shocked. Chen Zhao's wealth was greater than he'd imagined. Boss. Isaac entered the manor and saw Chen Zhao lying on a chair in the yard. Okay, come with me. Chen Zhao glanced at Isaac and walked into the woods. Isaac didn't know what Chen Zhao was going to do, but he still followed obediently. Just then, a giant snail appeared in front of Isaac. Boss. What's this? Isaac was a bit scared. This snail was really too big. Its shell was already around 2 meters long. Don't worry, it's not aggressive. I called you here because I want you to study some of its data, raise it, breed it, and its needs for food. Right now, I only know that it mainly eats aquatic plants. Okay, boss. What's the use of this thing? Its meat provides my restaurant with nearly $10 million in profit every year. What do you think it's good for? Isaac almost slapped himself. He actually questioned the task his boss had given him. Also, how's the formation of your Marine Biology Research Institute team? Currently, the initial formation has been completed, but there are no projects worth researching yet. Have you heard of the mysterious island? I know. As a marine biology professional, how could Isaac not know about the mysterious island? That would cause a sensation in the biological world, especially in marine biology. Several famous international teams tried to contact the owner of the mysterious island and the person in charge. They hoped to conduct research on the mystical island, but they were all rejected. Your team is going to Mysterious Island to study the giant sea creatures there, Chen Zhao said. Boss, you've already contacted the person in charge of the mystical island? The mystical island is mine. Why? Isaac stared at Chen Zhao in shock. The mystical island belonged to his boss? He'd heard that the mystical island's commercial value was over $100 billion. The creatures on the mystical island had already shocked the scientific world. There were even huge repercussions in society. There were all kinds of news about the mystical island almost every day. Even Hollywood was planning to get in on the action. Some film companies even planned to make movies about the mystical island. The outside world had also been guessing who the mysterious owner of the mystical island was. He didn't expect Chen Zhao to be the owner of the mystical island. He recalled that before the mystical island had appeared, Chen Zhao had already recruited him and formed a marine biology research team. This meant that Chen Zhao already knew of the mystical island's existence. He could even calculate the mystical island's rise. This made Isaac respect Chen Zhao even more. What kind of team could calculate the rise and fall of an island? Unless it was the world's top mathematical team and had the help of a supercomputer. Otherwise, Oken wouldn't be able to calculate when an island would rise from the sea. Boss, I'll do my best to complete the mission you gave me. I won't disappoint you. That's for the best. Chen Zhao nodded. Chen Zhao didn't care if Isaac was ambitious or not. Everyone had the right to aspire to a better life. Just then Chen Zhao received a call. It was from Zola. Chen, I'm planning to release a new spring collection. Do you need it? Now. If you're free. Then I'll go over now. Isaac glanced at Chen Zhao. After Chen Zhao hung up, he said, Boss, if you're busy, I'll leave first. Okay. I'll have someone send this snail over. After sending Isaac off, Chen Zhao went to the Baroness headquarters. It was just like his first time here. It was still so busy. Designers, assistants, and models were all moving around the venue. A tall model walked hurriedly and bumped into Chen Zhao. Are you blind? Sorry. Chen Zhao smiled and took 2 steps back. Shut up, bitch. Nat jogged over. When he looked at Chen Zhao, he had a big smile on his face. Chen, you're here. Come with me. Nat pulled Chen Zhao's wrist and walked to his dressing room. Smiling, Chen Zhao broke free from Nat's hand without batting an eyelid. Nat had always said that he was straight. However, Chen Zhao found it hard to believe someone who was used to pointing at him. As if he didn't feel it, Nat pulled Chen Zhao into the dressing room. "All of you get out," Nat said. "Ava, you stay." Ava was wearing glasses, but it wasn't hard to tell that she was a beauty. To be honest, the Baroness employees, whether it was normal runners, assistants, or designers, were almost all handsome men and beautiful women. Not to mention the models here. Even if it was Sissy Knight, he was still a handsome guy. Nat's clothes were more feminine. He was indeed a handsome guy. And he was the kind of handsome guy who had quite an imposing aura. He wasn't any worse than Hollywood stars. 9 Heavens God King. Chapter 26:18. Chun, take off your shirt and pants. Nat had taken advantage of Chen Zhao many times. Every season, Chen Zhao would come over to get his body measured. Then Nat would drag him in. Actually, it was fine as long as he was familiar with it. Chen Zhao hoped that Triss would help him measure his body. However, Triss would measure Feilai every time. Chen Zhao did not want Nat to touch her. When Chen Zhao took off his clothes, Nat and Ava's eyes widened. "Chun, your body is perfect," Nat said, swallowing. Ava wiped away the saliva at the corner of her mouth and gently touched Chen Zhao's chest. Chen Zhao's skin was slightly yellow. His 2 chest muscles were like exquisite brass, shining with a metallic luster. The intoxicating feeling made Ava a bit dazed. Smiling, Chen Zhao pushed Ava's hand away. Only then did Ava reluctantly move her hand away. Ava glanced at Nat. Nat had walked behind the curtain to take out his tools. "How much do you charge?" Ava asked in a low voice. Chen Zhao was stunned. Did she think of him as a model? He heard that many models had special part-time jobs. Did he look like a part-time model? "How much do you think I'm worth?" Ava gritted her teeth and looked Chen Zhao up and down. $2,000. Chen Zhao chuckled. He did not expect Ava to pay $2,000. After all, an assistant's salary was not high. Even if an assistant designer's salary was higher than that of assistants in other industries. But $2,000 was not a small amount for most people. She was actually willing to spend $2,000 on him. Or was he worth $2,000? Just then Nat walked out. Ava immediately shut her mouth. Nat glared at Ava, and she immediately shrunk her head. It seemed that Nat was quite intimidating in front of Ava. While Nat was about to measure, Ava gave Chen Zhao another name card. She gestured to Chen Zhao with her hand. "Call me." After Nat finished his preparations, he finally came to measure Chen Zhao's body. "Chen, your body is really perfect. It's like a piece of art. Full of power, but it doesn't destroy the beauty." With that, Nat patted Chen Zhao's butt. "Turn around." Nat was always like this. He would habitually take advantage of Chen Zhao, and then change the topic, as if nothing had happened. Rubbing his forehead, Chen Zhao said, "Nat, if you want, I can train you for free." If Knight really agreed, Chen Zhao wouldn't mind taking revenge on him. Unfortunately, Nat did not fulfill his wish. "Forget it, I'm not your style," Knight said. "I prefer this kind of neutral style." "You call this neutral? Apart from your sexual characteristics, which part of you look like a man? Are you an idiot? All you can do is stand there. Don't you know how to lend a hand? Press the other end of the ruler down." Nate suddenly changed his attitude and shouted at Ava. Not only was Ava shocked, but Chen Zhao was also shocked. There was no doubt that Nat was an outstanding designer. However, his personality was truly unflattering. Just then, Zola pushed the door open and entered. "Hi, Chen." Zola pulled a chair over and looked at Knight and Ava. Chen Zhao was the only one left, controlled by Knight. "Zola." Chen Zhao nodded and continued to cooperate with Nat's torture. "Your body is getting better. As long as you keep exercising, anyone can do it. I interact with models every day. I've seen at least 1,000 models' bodies, but I've never seen a man's body like yours. It's so thrilling." Zola shook her head. "You look like a lion. You don't have exaggerated lines, but there's a mysterious danger. See, Chen, even Zola says that." Nat seemed to have found someone who understood him. Although Knight said that, he did not slack off at all in his work. His work was extremely meticulous. For example, the circumference of Chen Zhao's wrist, upper and lower wrist, neck circumference, neck length. Every measurement had to be carefully measured. "Ava, grabbed that one," Nat scolded again. Even with Zola present, Nat's attitude towards Ava did not change at all. Just then, Zola stood up and pulled the other end of the ruler. Seeing that her boss had started, Ava could only retreat to the side and watch. Does it feel tight? Nat asked. A little looser. How about this? You can loosen it a little more, Chen Zhao said. Yeah, that's more like it. Chen, are you interested in buying shares in the Baroness? Are you sure? Chen Zhao looked at Zola in surprise. In the bank's evaluation, the Baroness was also a high-quality property. It provided Zola with generous returns every year. It could be said that as long as she asked the bank to use the Baroness shares as collateral, the bank could give a low-interest loan that was 5 times the Baroness valuation. Zola had 100% control over the shares. Even when her father, Rasfa, wanted to buy it, she rejected him. Ava found it strange. Finding a model to buy shares in the Baroness? I have no choice, Zola said helplessly. I'm really short on money recently. The bank didn't lend you money? The interest is still too high, Zola said. At least for me, it's too much pressure. Didn't I promise that as long as you need it, I can lend you money at the lowest interest? Zola shook her head. I need more money. How much? $1.5 billion. You don't need to pay that much, right? My father wants me to buy more shares, Zola said. He needs some cash flow. To put it bluntly, Zola and Rasfa were father and daughter. Zola was destined to inherit Rasfa's wealth in the future. The more Rasfa had, the more inheritance tax he would have to pay in the future. Thus, Rasfa and Zola wanted to reduce their wealth through some normal operations. Are you interested in the Baroness? Zola continued the previous topic. Yes, Chen Zhao said directly. How many shares are you planning to sell to me? Not more than 20%. This was also why Lin Beyonce always looked down on Chen Zhao. It was hard for anyone to respect such an heir person. But now Chen Zhao seemed to be a different person. At the same time, she also understood that Chen Zhao didn't need to participate in those battles. What was the point of shooting a mosquito with a cannon? Chen Zhao looked at the dragon in the sky. The dragon seemed to sense danger, and immediately flapped its wings to fly into the sky. A small black ball condensed in Chen Zhao's hand and shot toward the dragon. The power of the small black ball was 100 times greater than the power of the small world condensed before. Boom! A ripple exploded in the sky. The terrifying power sent the dragon flying thousands of meters away and smashing into the ground. But in the arena, killing someone wasn't as simple as a fist. The reason why this human didn't kill him was because he was interested in him. But once this point disappeared, with how cruel this human was, would he spare his own life? How do I sign it? Chen Zhao knew the general steps, but he didn't know the details. At that moment, the dragon drew a magic circle on the ground with its claws, and dripped a drop of its blood into the magic circle. You can also drip a drop of blood into it. After that, you will receive a spiritual resonance. You just need to accept this spiritual resonance. Chen Zhao wasn't worried that the dragon would play tricks. Of course, the dragon didn't play any tricks either. During the spiritual resonance, Chen Zhao found out that this guy was called Saboni's Angel Haber. Unlike his demon servants, Chen Zhao couldn't ask for too much even though they were inferior to Chen Zhao. But Saboni's was different. He was a complete servant, a slave. This meant that Chen Zhao could ask for anything other than suicide. Saboni's couldn't disobey any of Chen Zhao's orders. Chen Zhao also found out from Saboni's spiritual communication. Saboni's was an earth elemental dragon, but he was different from other earth elemental dragons. He was better at physical attacks. Moreover, the skills he developed weren't pure magic. Most of them were physical attacks that were modified with earth elemental magic. Of course, these physical attacks still had magic elements. The reason why his skin was so thick was also explained. He shifted Chen Zhao's attacks to the ground. For example, the first time Chen Zhao blasted him down from the sky, he was severely injured. But after that, Chen Zhao punched him over 100 times, but the damage wasn't as much as the previous one. At the same time that they signed the contract, Chen Zhao and Lindsay Beyonce also received the notification that they had passed. Sabonis wasn't a unit. He was only Chen Zhao's pet, and part of Chen Zhao's combat power. Therefore, the difficulty wouldn't increase because of him. Lin Beyonce was very nervous at this moment. She followed Chen Zhao to the 10th floor. Sabonis was still a bit dull. He didn't know that he was in the Tower of Trials. He even thought that he was in a complete world. The moment Chen Zhao reached the 10th floor, his expression changed slightly. Sabonis, protect this little guy, Chen Zhao said seriously. There would be a huge battle next. This was because Chen Zhao could already sense 12 terrifyingly powerful auras approaching them from the front. The owners of the 12 auras were all giant dragons. But they weren't ordinary adult dragons. They were 12 dragons at the level of dragon fathers. Soon, Sabonis also sensed that the 12 terrifying auras were approaching him. Master, run. Chen Zhao didn't run. Instead, he stood there expressionlessly. Around him, 12 small black balls started forming. Level 1 and 2 of the primordial regression technique. Therefore, if they didn't kill one, they would really die. Chen Zhao kicked off the ground and shot out. However, none of the remaining 11 dragons, that were at the level of Dragon Father, were easy to deal with. Even Chen Zhao would not be able to win easily against a dragon of the same level as the Dragon Father. Phantom. Right at this moment, a relatively smaller giant dragon uttered a cry in the dragon language. Its body flashed, and 5 identical giant dragons appeared. I see you. Chen Zhao targeted the first one and pounced at it. But in the end his punch missed and hit the air. On the other hand, Chen Zhao's phantom, who was free, slapped him with a dragon claw. Chen Zhao flipped a dozen times in the air. Just then the second wave of attacks came. A fire dragon shot a super sun at Chen Zhao from behind. Before the super sun, Chen Zhao was as small as an ant. The super sun swallowed Chen Zhao in an instant. Chen Zhao also felt the horrifying heat. But at the same time, Chen Zhao felt his blood boil like never before. At the moment, Lindsay Beyonce watched the battle in the sky in astonishment. Is this a war between dragons? No, that's not a war between dragons, Sabonis said helplessly. Regular dragons can't fight like that. For example, I don't even have the right to get close. The super sun in the distance suddenly exploded. Chen Zhao stood unscathed in the center of the explosion. No, not unscathed. Because right now, Chen Zhao's body was also burning with flames. The battle between the 11 dragons and Chen Zhao was intense. It wasn't an earth-shattering battle, but it was close. Your boss looks like he's at a disadvantage. Lindsay Beyonce was actually a bit worried. But she didn't say it. Instead, she glanced at Sabonis, who had been protecting her with his wings. Sabonis actually didn't care about Lindsay's life or death. But since his boss said so, he had to obey. Sabonis shook his head. Didn't you notice? My master looks like he's being attacked, but he's not injured. Lindsay Beyonce was stunned. How was that possible? It was such a fierce battle and such crazy attacks. How could he not be injured? Yes, he's not injured, which means that the 11 dragon fathers can't hurt my master. And my master can kill any one of them at any time. Therefore, the direction of this battle will be that the 11 dragon fathers will be killed by my master one by one. It was as if Sabonis had made a premonition of death. Just like he'd said, the battle was going on in this manner. Chen Zhao was indeed uninjured. Then he killed the dragons one by one. It wasn't as easy as the first golden dragon. But it wasn't so difficult that Chen Zhao couldn't do it. Chen Zhao still walked his own path. When you don't hurt me, I have many choices how to hit you. These dragon fathers had lived for at least 1,000 years. But they'd never met such a difficult opponent. But there was one thing that they were stronger than Sabonis. Thus, in order to clear the trial tower's 11th floor, the first thing to do was not to increase one's combat power. It was resistance. Chen Zhao was even considering if he should use some channels to create something that could cause a world war. Then he could find a quiet place to play. To be honest, this idea was scary, but it also made Chen Zhao's heart race. Chen Zhao finished off the 12 dragon fathers, leaving nothing behind. Then he landed before Lindsay Beyonce and Sabonis. Now Lin Beyonce could no longer face Chen Zhao as arrogantly as before. She would never think of such a stupid idea again. Seized by West. West's old bones couldn't even withstand one of Chen Zhao's fingers. Sometimes, the so-called seizing of power was based on the fact that the two sides were equal in strength. However, when the strength of the two sides in the game was not on the same level, it could only be regarded as authorization. You can have what I give you. You can't take it if I don't give it to you. However, when a giant dragon appeared in the headquarters of the supernatural organization, many people were shocked. Everyone stared at Sabonis, as if they were facing a great enemy. But when they saw Chen Zhao, they all heaved a sigh of relief. All of them together couldn't handle an adult dragon. But Chen Zhao was different. Even if 100 dragons came, Chen Zhao could take them all. When they realized that the dragon was Chen Zhao's pet, they were even less surprised. Anyway, they all knew that Chen Zhao's family already had a young dragon. It seemed to be called a Betos. It was still very young. At least to an adult dragon, a Betos was about the size of a lizard. But to a normal person, it was basically a monster. Sabonis, can you turn into a human? Human? Why are you in human form? Chen Zhao and Sabonis had a spiritual resonance. As long as their spiritual powers were connected, they could communicate directly. Just do it when I tell you to. Stop talking. Chen Zhao did not have a good attitude towards Sabonis. Most people would find it hard to cherish someone who threw themselves at them. For example, Chen Zhao would grant a Betos everything at home. He practically raised a Betos like a son. As for Sabonis, Chen Zhao basically raised him like a dog. Master, I can't change. I don't know how. President, the dragon transformation magic came from humans, West said. They can't turn into humans naturally. Is that so? I thought that when dragons become adults and are strong enough, they can turn into humans directly. Everyone rolled their eyes. Did Chen Zhao think that dragons could turn into humans naturally just because they had nothing better to do? But that's troublesome. The airport construction site is not far away. It's too obvious for such a big guy to run around. How big was Sabonis? Lying on the ground, he was about 3 stories tall at his highest point.